Welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio, where each week we discuss the most interesting topics in the world of Indiana basketball. This is our 199th edition of Assembly Call Radio, and it is our 670th episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of January 28th, 2021. I am your host, Jerod Morris. And let's begin this edition of the Assembly Call how we begin every edition of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment.
And Indiana is the national champion.
When it comes down, Indiana will be champion.
Smart takes the shot.
The Hoosiers have won the national championship.
So our last edition of Assembly Call Radio was all the way back on December 17th, and at that time, Indiana was 4-2 after beating North Alabama. Since then, the Hoosiers have gone 5-5, ironically winning the toughest game in that stretch by 12 at Iowa, while also dropping 3 home games to teams ranked 30th or worse and needing overtime to avoid losing a fourth. In other words, here in Archie Miller's fourth season, these Hoosiers are still the same old mediocre, inconsistent Hoosiers that we've come to know, just with slightly higher computer rankings in a season where most Big Ten teams have pretty good computer rankings. In other words, not much has happened over the last 6 weeks that really fills any IU fan with much legitimate hope that the program is on a discernible path toward a sixth banner right now. But it is my job to squint and strain and stretch to find something positive to grasp onto, and so I will, and it's actually a pretty important one. My banner moment this week encompasses the 14 offensive and defensive possessions that Armaan Franklin, Christian Lander, and Anthony Leal played together against Rutgers. In an otherwise disappointing performance by Indiana, these 3 young players gave Indiana fans some reason to believe in the future of the program. With the 3 of them playing together, Indiana outscored Rutgers by .43 points per possession. That's a ton. During the other 53 possessions of the game, Rutgers hammered Indiana by .17 points per possession. Now, this is a really small sample size, like really, really small. And the offensive output was obviously buoyed by Christian Lander's best shooting as a collegian. He's not going to keep making every three-pointer he takes. But I do think it's telling that in a home game Indiana absolutely had to have, its underclassmen in the backcourt outperformed its upperclassmen. Now, to be fair, Rob and Al have had their moments over the past 6 weeks. Both were key in the Iowa win, for example. But at the end of the day, they are what they are, role players. They are low-usage, moderately efficient guards in a game that is won or lost with guard play. Sure, you can win with low-usage, moderately efficient guards when they are flanked by NBA talent on the wings and in the post. Look at Michigan this season. But that's rare. Most teams, especially in the Big Ten, need high-usage, efficient guards to compete at the top of the conference. Now, I don't know if Lander, Leal, and Franklin can get there over the next few seasons, but I'm at least intrigued to find out. What we do know is that Franklin and Lander's DNA as basketball players is to be aggressive and put pressure on a defense. Both have usage rates deemed significant, quote-unquote, which means 20% or higher. Armaan's is actually 25% in conference games. And Leal's shooting ability gives him a chance to be a Nick Zeisloff type, who may be low usage, but very high in efficiency. Modern offenses are built around backcourt trios like this. Look, I'm not writing off Rob and Al. The irony of this banner moment is that they've actually improved of late. On balance, over the last 6 weeks, they've played some of the best basketball of their careers. But I think it's fair to say that big picture, on an Indiana roster capable of competing for a Big Ten title, they both would be reserve players playing specific roles instead of featured players playing 3/4 of the minutes. For this Indiana program to legitimately take the next step, its guard play has to become more dynamic and more consistent. Are Lander, Leal, and Franklin the guys to do it? I don't know. But if the Archie Miller era is ever going to get over the hump, they'll have to be. And on Sunday against Rutgers, they at least showed a small flash that they might be. Okay, now let me introduce my esteemed co-host for this week's show. To my left.
Analyzing players, finding every wrinkle. He hasn't ever hosted, never lifted a finger. He's got all the
Well, let me quickly add just one thing about this.
Dude just interrupted his own jingle.
Sometimes you are just walking into a bear's mouth.
Ryan, what is your rant on the last 6 weeks in IU basketball?
Boy, it's been disappointing, hasn't it? I think, I don't remember exactly what the last game was before we did a show, so I don't know where to chart that out, but let's just look at Big Ten play. I mean, a loss at home to Northwestern, where, Audi's just went off at the end, but at the same time, they shouldn't have even been in that situation to begin with. It shouldn't have been that close. You go on the road to Illinois and you're playing well and you look like you have a chance to contend and then just drop the ball over the last few minutes, and certain guys didn't show up for that game. You lose in double overtime at Wisconsin in a game you had plenty of opportunities to win and couldn't get over the hump and do it. Then you get whacked at home by Purdue. You go on the road to Iowa and you win a game and it looks like, hey, maybe this is the turning point, and then follow that up by dropping the ball at home against Rutgers. I mean, it's this team. I know we used to talk about during the Crean era that it was one year to the next was just crazy, fluctuations in what everything would be. I mean, with Archie Miller, it's game to game. You don't know what you're going to get out of these teams. And the stat that they're 2-9, I believe it was, following up top 25 wins in his era, in his coaching era. I mean, that's astonishingly bad. That you can beat a top 25 team and not follow it up with a win is unbelievable. And this week off is probably the best thing that could happen to them at this point after that loss, simply because the last time they had a week off due to a cancellation, they came out and played really well. Problem is they didn't follow it up, and they didn't give you any hope that they would continue to be able to win a big game and ever follow it up again. So they got Illinois next week, and that's a game at this point with the games you've lost at home. You've got to win. You have to win that game if you want to sort of build on anything. And then guess what? There's no rest. You welcome Iowa back, and Iowa's itching to get back at Indiana for that game. So you've had opportunities to really build yourself and pad yourself a nice resume, and you've blown them against Northwestern, against Wisconsin, against Purdue. You've had a chance, and you haven't taken advantage of it. And how many times in 4 years can you not take advantage of the opportunities given to you and still want people to have faith in you? That's where I'm at right now. And I'm not just talking about the coaches. I'm talking about the players as well. At some point, somebody has to step up and take advantage of something that's handed to you. They've had opportunities handed to them, and this could be, they could easily have 12 wins right now and be 12-4 and solidly inside the top 25. Easily. I'm not talking about if a bunch of things go their way. I'm talking about if somebody for 2 minutes in a game plays better, they could be there, and they're not. And that's a problem. And we're continually dealing with that problem. And overall, that's the issue with this program right now. And so that's where we are.
Well said. Okay, to my right. He is the founder and editor of Inside the Hall, the host of Podcast on the Brink, and the most underpaid PR representative of Disney World. He is Alex Bozich. Alex, take us inside the hall. Where the heck are we with this basketball program right now?
A great question, and one that I don't know that I have all the answers for, but thanks for having me back on Assembly Call Radio. It's good to be back, see both of your smiling faces here. But it's is it
really good to see Ryan's face? That's polite and all. But is it really good?
That beard is beautiful. It's.
I appreciate it. You know what? I don't get enough compliments on this thing. I appreciate that.
But man, how long do we have tonight, Jerod? We have an hour, right?
Unless we need more. Coach and I went for an hour and 45 minutes after the Rutgers game, so sometimes you just need more time.
I had to turn it off eventually, I'll be honest with you.
There's a lot of things to talk about, obviously, but I think I'll start with what you mentioned kind of off the top, Jerod, about the guard play. And I think there is something to the fact that Rob Finney and Al Durham's inconsistencies are a big problem with this team. They're upperclassmen guards. They are two guys who, by this point in their careers, you should at least have a baseline of expectation on what you can get from them on a game-to-game basis, and it's just not happening. When they do play well, see like the Iowa game, Indiana can be a really good team. When they don't play well, Indiana has some of their worst losses. I think the Northwestern game was a game neither one of those guys did very much. The Rutgers game, neither one of those guys were very good. And so it's really leaving this program and this team in particular in position where if Trace Jackson Davis isn't elite, Indiana's not going to win any games. It really, to me, it comes down to that. in terms of what's gone on in conference play, I think the biggest disappointment for Indiana fans and just anyone, I think, probably within the program is the defense so far in conference play, because that was something that early in the season that Indiana was really able to hang its hat on, had some really good performances, to get them to that 5-2 non-conference record. And I think most people felt like, if this program was going to, kind of make a jump into that top half of the Big Ten standings, it was going to have to be with defense. And right now, looking at their efficiency numbers, I haven't looked at them in a couple of days, and I don't know if there's anything changed, but I know that their offense is ranked higher than the defense is in Big Ten play. That's not a good sign for what Archie Miller is trying to do. So it's very frustrating, I think, for a lot of people that watch this team. I'm getting a lot of questions. You said take me inside the hall. The thing that's most concerning to me, like in terms of the fan base right now, it very much feels like to me right now that people are starting to pick sides. It's either Archie's the guy and we still want to stick beside him, or we're done with the guy. And it's not really a great place to be, I don't think, for an athletic department or a coach in year 4 of your tenure, where you've already got people, and I don't know what the percentage of them actually is, but you've already got people writing them off. So, I don't have the answers. But to me, I look at the guards and I really just look at kind of the starting lineup right now. And I was talking to somebody about this the other day. You look at Indiana's starters right now, besides Trace Jackson Davis, who in the starting lineup for one of the top teams in the Big Ten would start or play a significant role on those teams? I don't know who I can point to. Armand Franklin, when he's playing well, yes, but the last couple of games since he's been hurt, he's not that guy. So, I think they're too heavily reliant on one player to produce an elite level game in and game out. And Trace had a bad game against Rutgers, and Indiana in turn lost. So, and the thing that Ryan brought up about the losses after ranked wins, I mean, that's a problem, because it shows that they can't build any sustained momentum. I mean, you would have thought that after the Iowa game, they come home and take care of business. They want to get a win against Rutgers and then take them into this huge week against Illinois and Iowa. All of a sudden, you win 3 or 4 games in a row, and the season's totally different. It's like they take 2 steps forward, and then it's another step back.
Yeah, and instead our center stands flat-footed during the opening tip.
I didn't even see that. I understand there was some controversy this week about warm-ups or something. Somebody sent me a couple links, but
we got a question about it, so we can.
Okay.
We'll on a show we're real popular on. They talked about it.
Yeah.
I have some takes on that.
Okay. Well, we'll get to that. So here's what we're going to talk about this week. We got some Hoosier headlines, and then we're going to continue this conversation about where the program stands more than midway through year 4 of the Archie Miller era. And we got a bunch of questions from you guys, so we're going to sprinkle those throughout the proceedings here this evening. All of that coming this week on Assembly Call Radio. Before we get to all of that, I want to talk a little bit about insulation, and specifically superior insulation from our friends at Superior Insulators. And the first thing that you need to know about them, as with almost all of our sponsors, is that they are die-hard Hoosiers. Brad, the owner of Superior Insulation, is an IU fan and a longtime Assembly Call listener. And the second thing that you need to know about Superior Insulation is that they will literally make your life more comfortable by helping you fix drafty rooms, cold floors, and even excess noise. Plus, their systems help you save money through lower utility bills. More comfort and cost savings? That's like Christian Lander making threes and playing solid defense in the same game. It seems crazy, but now it's real. And with winter here bringing its frigid temperatures, now is the perfect time to invite Brad and his team out to your home or business so that they can do for you what they did for IU. Yes, the Superior Insulators did all the air barrier systems and spray foam for the new IU Excellence Academy. Brad and his team also worked on the new football locker room, Marching 100 Hall, and many other buildings on campus. Like I said, they are Hoosiers through and through and damn good at what they do. A longtime listener named Rick, who Alex might know, reached out back in December and told me he booked a consultation with Superior Insulation, and you should too. Because check this out. They have a special offer for Assembly Call listeners. You will get a $50 home field apparel gift card when you call and schedule an appointment in a qualifying area. And the Superior Insulators have 4 locations covering roughly the southern 2/3 of Indiana, plus the northern part of Kentucky. Just tell them the Assembly Call sent you to get your gift card. So visit insulators.com or just Google Superior Insulation to learn more and schedule your appointment. Then Brad and his team can help you create a healthier, quieter, and more energy-efficient home. That's insulators.com, insulators.com to learn more, and tell them the Assembly Call sent you to get your $50 home field apparel gift card. All right, gentlemen, let's do some Hoosier headlines here. A couple things that I just saw fly by on Twitter. One, Rutgers apparently beat Michigan State 67-37. So this is the kind of bizarro college basketball world that we're living in right now. And I saw that the tip time was announced for the Illinois game on Tuesday, and it is a 9 o'clock tip. So good for those of you living in San Diego, not so good for the rest of us.
That's right during dinner time, man. It's rough. You guys have it easy.
But the first headline that I want to hit right off the top is news that broke today that Matt Cross, a former IU target, is leaving the Miami program. Leaving or kicked off. I don't know if there's been official confirmation of that. I've heard different things. Obviously, this provided a nice moment of optimism for IU fans as everybody started picturing the lineup next year with Matt Cross already in it, because we're kind of at that stage of the season. Alex, I think a lot of Indiana fans remember this recruitment, remember that Archie was really high on him. I don't remember where Indiana finished. I know they were in the Final Four. Is there any reason at this point for IU fans to get excited about this yet, or is this just something we got to see, wait and play out, and we just don't know enough right now?
Yeah, well, it sounds like Jeff Goodman did tweet earlier that it was a Miami decision that he's gone from the program. So I guess my next question would be, what specifically are the circumstances of his departure? And I think that's going to be the question for a lot of programs who wouldn't be interested in a kid who's 6'7", 8 that can shoot threes and space the floor. I got a chance to watch him play a couple weeks ago when they played Louisville, and I was watching him and I was like, this is kind of what Indiana needs really on its team this year. And so, I think it's a situation where you got to figure out what kind of went wrong for him at Miami and whether or not you'd be interested in bringing him in. But in terms of fit, in terms of talent, in terms of familiarity, you asked about where Indiana finished. I mean, they got an official visit from him, so they were obviously clearly there in the mix. So, I mean, if I'm Indiana, I'm at least making phone calls and trying to figure out exactly what happened, but you don't necessarily like to see a headline that a guy was the decision was Miami's, that he's leaving on January 28th. Usually when a transfer or something like that happens, they at least wait till the end of the season or do it mid-season, but this is kind of right in the middle of things, so that kind of raises the red flag. But
that's what Miami says anyway, that it was their decision. So
yeah, I mean, exactly. So if it wasn't their decision, then I would expect the kid to come out or somebody close to the kid and give us the story. So
yeah,
it'll come out. Trust me, it'll definitely
always comes
out.
Always comes out. Ryan, do you have any thoughts on Matt Cross?
Yeah, I think that here's the thing: as Alex said, you got to figure out what happened first. I mean, and I'm sure that every program in the country that it was even remotely connected to Matt Cross is making a lot of phone calls right now, because that's a talented kid who, as Alex said, can shoot the ball, is power forward, small forward size, like would be a undersized stretch four or a small forward, exactly what Indiana's missing on their roster, especially for next year. But you lose out on a guy like Trey Kaufman, and Matt Cross fills that a similar role as a guy who can move and stretch the floor and stuff. And I watched him play a couple times this year. He was fitting in well in college basketball. He could play in college basketball, at a high level. That wasn't a guy who, was over recruited and showed up and then all of a sudden needed to develop. He can play now. And so I think there are going to be a lot of schools across this country digging into sources to figure out exactly what happened. And it'll come out, whether it comes out exactly what it was or not, the gist will come out. And if you're Indiana, you have open scholarships. I think you got to make those phone calls like immediately. And I'm sure they are. I mean, every school is going to be working the phones on this one. So if it's nothing completely objectionable and horrible, that's a guy you got to consider, especially considering who you missed out on in this recruiting cycle. It might not be bad to take a flyer on that as a transfer. And transfers are, it's funny. Indiana fans have sort of a visceral reaction against taking transfers because that's just not how the program operated for so long. It recruited at such a high level. You could kind of pick and choose who you wanted. And you didn't take junior college guys, and you didn't really take transfers. You lost transfers. You didn't take transfers. Well, that's not college basketball anymore. There are high-level transfers at top-level schools all the time now. It's part of the game, and you never stop recruiting, and you never stop, looking for ways to fix your team immediately. And the transfer can definitely help, especially with the ways the rules are, allowing people to transfer without having to sit out a year. And that's why most school, a lot of top schools didn't do it for a long time, because you had to plan out a year in advance what your roster was going to look like. Now you can get immediate impact transfers, and it definitely changes the game.
Worked in 1987. Do what you got to do to get the guys that fit your program and help you win.
Agree 100%.
One last topic I want to hear real quick on the topic of transfers. Alex, we saw that Parker Stewart arrived on campus. Cliff Marshall's tweeting out pictures of him working out. He's showing up at games. Is there any reason yet for IU fans to start holding their breath that he will play this year? As we know, he can if he wants to without burning a year of eligibility, but there was a lot of talk that he kind of wanted to get acclimated, get back in shape, all that stuff. What do you think? Is there anything to be waiting around for on that right now?
Well, I asked Archie Miller about it a couple weeks ago. After I knew that he had arrived, there was a period of time where once he got on campus, he had to clear quarantine and protocol and all that before he could actually be around his teammates and be around the program, be in practice. And Archie had said at that time, I think it was probably 2 weeks ago maybe, that it was going to be the following week to where he would start doing some things in terms of practice. I mean, I think ultimately it's going to come down to whether the kid himself wants to play. I don't think it's a situation where I could be wrong here because I don't know this for a fact, but I don't think if you're Indiana, you're turning down any help at this point in the season based on the performance recently. This is a guy that's played at the highest level of Division I, so it's not like he's coming in as a young guy that has no experience. So from a shooting perspective, can he help? Yes. Defensively, I don't know what the ramp-up period is for him to get acclimated to the pack line. I'm sure there's going to be an adjustment period. The thing I wonder is, from a strength and conditioning perspective, him not playing all season. And then you've also got to take into account that his dad tragically passed away a couple months ago. From a mental perspective, that's a lot of burden for any person to kind of process, and if he's not ready from that perspective, it'd be totally understandable. So it's got to be a situation, I think, where he's totally 100% ready to do it. But if I'm Indiana and he wants to get in there at some point, I'd probably like it to be a little bit sooner rather than later. I don't know that you want to put him in for his first minutes in March, but if he can do it in the next couple of weeks, I think it's something definitely worth exploring.
Yeah. Okay. Well, coming up after 10 straight post-game shows with no Assembly Call radio, it is time to kind of take a step back and look at the big picture, and we will do that. What is the state of Indiana basketball right now, and how much can things change over the rest of this particular season to change our outlook? Stick with us here on the Assembly Call. All right. Well, thanks for joining us, Alex. It's good to have you here, man.
Thanks for having me.
So one story I was going to hit there, and we kind of ran out of time, was Tyler's story at Inside the Hall today about Armand Franklin and his mom. And Ryan, did you have a chance to read that yet?
Not yet. I have it bookmarked.
It's terrific, and I highly recommend that everybody go read it. And it, Tyler really does a good job of telling the story of their really unique, special relationship, and got a picture of the tattoos. They both have a love tattoo on their arm that they got together. And I was texting with Miss Franklin earlier tonight, and I told her I'm not sending that article to my mom because she's going to get jealous that I don't have a tattoo with love on it for my mom. But it's your mom's
probably cool with that, actually, Jerod.
What'd you say?
I said your mom's probably cool with that.
Yeah, she probably is, actually. But no, it's a great story. It talks about how when the pandemic hit, Armand said he needed a basketball goal. His mom went out, got him a basketball goal. She's out there playing with him, and just all the sacrifices that she made while they were growing up. It is. I don't want to give it all away, but Alex, if you want to comment on it, I just thought it was a really special story, and it's two reasons why a story like that is important that I thought about as I'm reading it. Number one, universities, this is why you open up your players and their families to the media so that those stories can be told, because number two, what I saw from so many people who commented on it in our community, on the article itself, on Twitter, is, man, love Armand, love the family. This was a good reminder that these are human beings with stories and, that you can really get behind. Even when they play poorly and the team doesn't play well, they are likable and they become more three-dimensional figures as opposed to just, 2D figures on a TV screen. So just a terrific article, and the kind of piece that I hope we can get more of. And by the way, hats off to Tyler, who did a terrific job writing it. It was really, really good.
Yeah, he's really hit the ground running in terms of, some of the stories that he did earlier, I think in the fall and early in the season, he didn't really actually talk to necessarily parents or the players themselves. But, the story they did on Trace, I think, was really well received. And in this instance, he asked around, and, the thing with all this stuff is with IU, and it's not just IU. It's like this at a lot of places. You got to get permission to talk to the parents and players and all that for these types of opportunities. But I think it's kind of a testament to the work that he's already put in and done previously this fall that he was able to get the access to do that story. And I mean, he knocked it out of the park. 2,500 words, well reported, got a ton of anecdotes and little stories in there. So definitely check it out. And, I think it's something that, like you said, Jerod, needs to be done more often, because it's easy to forget that these are, human beings with everyone has a story. It's not just, these guys aren't there just to play basketball and make fans happy. They're actually people with stories and different journeys. And it was cool to kind of see them both open up about their relationship. And I mean, I hope that, we'll be able to continue to do those types of pieces in the future.
Yeah. They're guys who love their mamas, and they're mamas who are watching what you're saying on Twitter and on social media, and, that just want the best for their kids and, are even more intense about the games than we are. So it was a great piece. All right. Do you guys want to talk conference tournaments now, or you want to do segment 2 and then talk about conference tournaments later? What do you feel?
Conference tournaments now.
Okay.
And then do
That's
questions.
Just trying to,
because I think
talk.
It's an interesting.
Okay. So, all right, so let's talk conference tournaments real quick, because this is obviously going to be a big question. They've talked about it several times on the Ion College Basketball podcast and elsewhere. And Alex, maybe you can set this up. You and Dylan talked about it too, and you and Andy talked about it also, with the possibility that teams could potentially opt out of conference tournaments. Also, I mean, I don't know if it's still realistic for the conferences themselves to cancel the tournaments given the TV contracts that they have, but it's a pretty big question. With everything that's going on with COVID right now, do you want to bring everybody to the same place and potentially jeopardize NCAA tournament appearances for your best teams for a tournament that can bring in obviously some money, but in the grand scheme of things doesn't mean a whole lot, especially in comparison to what can happen in the NCAA tournament? So, what do you think is going to happen, and what do you think should happen?
What I think is going to happen is that they're going to, as many leagues as possible are going to try to play, because as we all know that this is all about money from the onset. I mean, if we can just
TV
be clear
cash,
about that,
baby. TV
exactly.
cash.
So I think, live sports are still a cash cow for, conferences and TV networks. So they're going to try to get as much of that inventory as possible. I just looked at it. A couple of things in terms of teams opting out. I think if you're going to play the tournament, you need to have every team committed to play. Otherwise, don't play the tournament, because all of a sudden, if you start having these, what if the Big Ten says, well, we have 8 teams who we feel pretty good about are going to make it, right? But these other 6 teams, let's play them in this conference tournament. There's already enough about this season that's messed up. Like, why add another kind of one-off thing that the committee is going to have to sort through or try to figure out? I don't like the idea of letting teams opt out, and I don't think the conferences are going to go for that either, because the Big Ten tournament, part of the reason why it's viable is because you have all these teams, and no one wants to see a Big Ten tournament with Nebraska and Northwestern and whoever else the 3 or 4 bottom teams are in the league. So But from the Big Ten perspective,
On the bright side, we might win it.
Well,
because we'd probably have to play in it.
Jerod, it's the Big Ten tournament. We're not winning it.
Hey, we won it last year. We could go back to back.
So no, but hear me. I want to hear what you guys think about this though, from the Big Ten perspective. You know, when I talked to Andy on podcast on the Brink this week, he was saying he had 11 in right now, but he thinks realistically 10 could get in, maybe 9 or 10. I agree with him. But from a Big Ten perspective, wouldn't you just want to try to play as many regular season games as possible and try to make up some of the other regular season games at the end of the year rather than risking bringing 14 teams together in a central? It's one thing like the NCAA tournament bubble. I feel pretty decent about that because all teams are in the tournament and they're all going to be committed to kind of doing the right thing so they can play their games. I'm not so sure that the Big Ten tournament, a team like Nebraska, and this is not me singling out Nebraska, but Nebraska has no legitimate case to be in the tournament. So are all those players going to be committed to all the protocols and everything that needs to be done if they're coming to the site? And I think it would be a complete nightmare for the Big Ten specifically if you have 2 or 3 teams get knocked out of the tournament based on something happened at the conference tournament. I'd rather just try to get as close to 20 games as possible and then move on if I'm the Big Ten.
Can they actually do that though? Like, is this conversation even worth it? Like, I mean, what kind of contracts and stuff do they have? That's what I'm saying. Like for the conference tournament, does the Big Ten have any leeway right now to change their plans 3 or 4 weeks out, or I guess 5 weeks out?
I mean, if the coaches all say they don't want to play, and then what's?
Yeah, I mean that's the issue. Is that, quite frankly, as I've learned as a sports reporter and writer in this, people are making this up as they go. You know, I mean, the NFL was considering a couple weeks ago getting rid of the break between the conference championship games and the Super Bowl, moving the playoffs all down 1 week except for the Super Bowl, and leaving the last week open for makeup games. Like, I mean, this was going on 6-7 weeks ago in the middle of a season. We're all making this up as we go. I mean, baseball is supposed to, they don't even know if they're going to have a DH in baseball this year. You know, they're still making up their rules as they go because, you know, they're not sure, you know, there's all kinds of labor issues with that. But at the same time, they're supposed to be going to spring training in a couple of weeks, and people don't even know if that's going to be possible in Arizona. Again, we're making this up as we go. If everybody says, hey, we're not playing the conference tournament, we're not shoving 14 teams in there without quarantining for 2 weeks or whatever, we don't know what everybody's going to have and all that, they could easily get rid of that tournament. And I agree with Alex that the logical step, if you get rid of the conference tournament or you don't move it back, I mean, you could say we'll move the conference tournament back and then we're going to move the NCAA tournament back and we're going to do this, whatever. I mean, they could do all of that. If they do, let's say no conference tournament this year, it's too complicated, it's too crazy, and use that week for makeup games. I think that makes complete sense. Indiana's got 2 they got to make up. Where are they going to make those up on the schedule? I mean, where are they going to make those up on the schedule right now? There's no real spot.
We just had an entire week go by without
this is the collapsible bye week, and Indiana's not playing. So
yeah. I mean,
that plan's out the window.
Yeah, and so again, you could do that, and then you've got, what was it? Michigan State how many games does Michigan State have to make up? And you could just, I guess you could figure out where everybody's scheduled and whatever, and figure out a way to do it. As many as possible.
I mean, at this point, Michigan State might be better off just forfeiting those games.
After tonight,
well, they're 8-5 now, so they have the minimum. They could just roll the dice and see if they're in now, right?
Basically, yeah. But I think it's certainly a question worth asking. I think that some conferences are definitely, if the hierarchy is clear, they're definitely going to say, let's just not do this. Shoving all those teams in one city and playing in one building it's just not smart.
I'd also have to know how much the Big Ten gets from the Big Ten tournament and compare that to what they get from teams being in the NCAA tournament and and they'd have to figure out kind of what the.
Well, I think Alex's point is great though. Is that what if you send a team to the Big Ten tournament, they get the virus and then can't go to the NCAA tournament? I mean, you're right. What's the trade-off there financially of that? And what's the trade-off just from having kids maybe who deserve to be in for 2 straight years not getting to go to the NCAA tournament because of one incident of having that. So, it's a fascinating question. It really is. And I think we're certainly to the point where in the next few weeks, they're going to have to announce something that, yes, we're definitely having it. If teams want to opt out, they can opt out. Or, yes, we're having it. They all have to participate. Or, no, we're not having it. They got to announce something pretty soon.
Yep.
But don't you think it's a slippery slope if you start letting teams opt out?
Oh, it is. It completely is. I'm just saying they might have to say that. Like, this team, if a team comes up with, they think it's too risky or whatever. I agree. It's a slippery slope. I'm saying that they may get to that point where they, late in the football season, they were letting teams opt out if they didn't feel they had enough on their roster to do it, and things like that. So you have to, assume that something similar is going to happen for basketball.
Yeah.
All those teams opted out of bowl games too.
This all could have been handled better in terms of the timing after the conference tournaments to the NCAA tournament. They could have made a 2-week barrier from the end of conference tournament and Selection Sunday to when the games actually start. And I don't want to hear any argument. I don't want to hear any argument though that either that teams are going to be rusty, because there's been plenty of conferences over the years who's had that longer break and they've been fine when the tournament happens. So at least I'm not saying maybe a full 2 weeks, but at least put a 10-day barrier or something like that to where you can at least. But to go from
daily
Chicago,
testing and all that stuff,
go to Chicago and then to Indy and think that everything's going to go smoothly, I just think is a little bit naive.
No, and I think we also have to prepare ourselves for the NCAA tournament, for a team getting it in the NCAA tournament. A team going to the Sweet 16 and then having to forfeit. You have to prepare yourself for that. It may not happen. They're
not stopping games. They're not changing the schedule.
Yeah, they're not gonna push games back because a team has a couple positive cases or anything like that. That team's gonna be gone. And it would have happened.
Big Ten player, if you get it, you're out 17 days. So if you get it at the conference tournament, you're done for the year.
No, and look, this didn't happen in Orlando, and a lot of people were saying, well, what if one team catches it? They're going to be just forfeit a playoff series. Well, they didn't do it. That didn't happen in Orlando. It still could have, but it didn't happen in Orlando because they bubbled them for months. And
that was an actual bubble. This isn't the tournament.
This isn't going to be that.
Bubble.
But that was an argument I heard from people. I was talking about this with some people, and they were saying, well, that was the threat of the NBA, and it didn't happen. It's like, well, yeah, because they actually bubbled them, and so this isn't going to be that. And I think it's reasonable to expect that that's going to happen to somebody, or it could happen to somebody, certainly.
Okay, well, we will wait to see what happens with that. But it certainly bears watching, because it could throw a wrench in everything that's coming this March. All right, guys, let's do segment 2 here. Let's talk about the state of the program.
Hey, guys, it's Gene Steratore, CBS officiating analyst and retired Big Ten basketball official. I have never listened to the assembly call, and to be honest, I don't intend to. But if you listen, make sure you ignore anything Ryan says about officiating. He's really good from the seat of his pants, but I wouldn't trust him on the court with a whistle around his neck. Time has proven him wrong on virtually everything. Take care. We'll talk soon.
He's really not that good from the seat of his pants, though. It really isn't. Welcome back to the Assembly Call. You can find all of our content at our website, assemblycall.com. And if you ever want to join the chat mob during our unedited live broadcast,
chat mobbers,
or watch those replays and see the between segment banter, then check out our YouTube channel, youtube.com/assemblycall. All right, I'm Jerod Morris, here with Ryan Phillips and Alex Bozich from Inside the Hall. And guys, it is time to kind of take a big picture view at the program here as we're deep into Archie's third season. A season in which I think we all agreed that the expectations certainly ramped up, after giving Archie some time, some patience, bring in a lot of his own recruits. And, here we are, and we got this question from Matt, and I think this is a good jumping off point. Matt says, is it too soon and too defeatist to start thinking Archie has shown us what he's going to show us and start thinking of moving on from him? Is that just irrational due to losing, or is it justified with 4 years of consistent, inconsistent performance, 0 tournaments, albeit with a probable one from last year? That's me adding that, not him. Terrible Big Ten record, and 1 week ranked in 4 years. Ryan, I'll start with you. What do you think? Is it too soon? Is it too defeatist? Or is it fair to start asking those questions now?
It's absolutely fair to start asking those questions. I think it was fair to start asking those questions at the beginning of the season and saying, hey, he's got to prove something this year. I mean, we did that. We said, I wrote an article to Big Lead that said this is his prove it year. This is his. You've got everything you've asked for. You haven't nailed all your recruits, but you've gotten a situation that is favorable to you, what do you do with it? And he hasn't lived up to expectations. It's fair to ask those questions completely. After that Purdue loss, I said, look, what more do you want to see? We've seen this same story play out year after year after year. Does it mean that Archie Miller is not a smart basketball guy? No, it doesn't mean that. You listen to him talk X's and O's. He knows what he's talking about. His philosophy works other places. It's not working here. It's not that he's not a smart coach. I think Archie Miller could go to a mid-major right now and turn a program around and be very good there. There is some disconnect that is happening between Archie Miller relaying what he wants to his players right now. Either the players don't listen, aren't listening, and aren't executing, or there's an issue with communication. There's something going on here, though, because you listen to the guy talk and you say, he knows what he's talking about in basketball. That is actually a sound philosophy. You look at certain things on the floor and you say, I understand what they're trying to do here. And then you watch it play out and it doesn't work, and it hasn't worked. And it has been consistently inconsistent, which is not a recipe for success, especially not in the Big Ten. And look, the Big Ten's hard. It's tough. You don't get off nights. You don't get nights where you get to rack up wins and then save yourself for the big game. Every week feels like a big game. It feels like a must-win game. I mean, they beat Iowa, and you still go into Rutgers, and you're like, well, you got to win this game. You can't take a game off. You got to win this game. And they lost it. So, yeah, it's completely fine to ask those questions. Now, if we wanted to get into the logistics of whether or not we actually think that he'll get fired, that's a different conversation to have. But it's certainly worth asking whether or not whether or not he fits this job and whether or not he's ever going to get it right.
It's probably a little bit too soon to ask that question about whether Indiana would actually move on from him, simply because a lot could happen between now and then. Because if this thing really bottoms out, they may have no choice. You know?
Right. What I'm saying is that's a more nuanced discussion than whether or not you can start asking the questions. You can ask the question now.
Yes.
Whether or not he'll actually be fired is a complicated discussion. Is a much more complicated discussion because it involves financial things. It involves the pandemic. It involves, does the athletic department even have the money to do it? Do the boosters have the money to help out? All of that stuff. It becomes much more complicated. Can you ask the question about whether or not he should have this job right now, or whether or not this is going to work out? Yeah, absolutely. Of course you can.
Yeah, and Alex, the way that I look at this, and again, Matt says, is it too soon and too defeatist to start thinking Archie has shown us what he's going to show us and start thinking of moving on from him? I'm at the point now, and Ryan, you're right. We entered this season saying, okay, look, I kind of expected this team to be 6th, 7th, 8th in the Big Ten, but said that the standard I was holding them to was, top 4 or 5 in the Big Ten, being an actual factor in the Big Ten race. And we're not there, and we don't seem to be on that trajectory. And I guess where I'm at with it is I do feel like I've seen enough. Like I don't believe in the direction that Archie's taking the program right now. I don't believe he's the right guy. Now, it doesn't really matter at this point in the season to say that one way or the other, because we have to see how the rest of the season plays out. And certainly if Indiana turns things around and if they make some run in the tournament, that is subject to change. But personally, I've just lost visceral confidence. I don't have confidence in the direction. I feel, Alex, you mentioned the defensive numbers. This is a team that was supposed to be built on a defensive identity. Indiana's best defense by far in Big Ten play was Archie's first season with all of quote-unquote Tom Crean's guys. That team finished 4th in the Big Ten in defensive efficiency. They're 9th right now, and they haven't finished higher than 8th in any other season. And Archie has not been able to do the single most important thing on a basketball team, which is have guys who can shoot and develop shooting. And so, we're 4 years in. It always feels like we have these massive kind of holes on the roster, and so, all of those things, I feel like 3.5 years is a lot of time. It's a lot of time to be able to know if you've got the guy. And that's not to say that Archie wouldn't be able to get to a tournament or two at Indiana or, be kind of a middle of the pack Big Ten team. But, we're not Penn State. The standards are higher, the expectations are higher, and sometimes with all the talk that we have about, well, the Big Ten is so tough, and this guy's hurt, and all of this stuff, it feels like the kind of excuses that lower tier Big Ten teams make for why they can't be a little bit better. The good Big Ten teams don't make excuses like that. They just finish in the top 4 or 5 every season, with maybe one blip of a season here and there, and I'm not feeling it. I don't have confidence now that that's going to happen. Doesn't mean that I'm not rooting for him and the team and all of that stuff, of course. But I think every fan kind of reaches that point where viscerally you just kind of stop believing in the direction. And I don't know exactly when that happened. I think it was sometime during the Purdue game, frankly. The seeds were planted before that. But that's kind of where I'm at with it, Alex. And, so I'm open-minded in terms of, hey, let's watch the rest of the season and see what can happen. But, I've lost the faith.
Yeah, I don't necessarily, I try to stay in terms of big picture discussions. I try to stay within the moment of the season, which is where we are right now. Mm-hmm. I understand everybody's concerns. I understand the discussion. It's totally, in my opinion, justified. And I think if I asked Archie Miller right now in a press conference, if he's kind of satisfied or happy with where the program is in terms of wins and losses, I think he would be the first to admit that the program hasn't performed up to the standard that he would like. So with all that said, ultimately coaching is a bottom line business, right? You either win enough to keep your job or you don't, and somebody else takes the job. That's basically how it works. And so long term, whether it be this year, next year, 2 years from now, he's going to have to start winning at a much better clip in order for him to continue to be the coach at Indiana University. That's just, that any coach that's in the situation of being at Indiana knows that ultimately you're going to have to start winning at a decent enough level, or actually at Indiana, the expectation is a lot higher. But, all of the concerns that Jerod, that you brought up in terms of shooting and defense, it's not just the perimeter shooting that drives people nuts right now. It's the free throw shooting this year. This is year 4. And to me, like some of the most basic things of basketball and that you're taught first are be able to shoot, be able to take care of the ball, and be able to guard somebody. That's how you build a winning culture. And Indiana right now, they're doing a decent job taking care of the ball. The other two things they don't do with any consistency from a game-to-game basis, and that's not a way to win in a league that's as tough as any in the country. So, I understand the nature of fandom is that when you get to a situation like Indiana's in right now, it feels like every game is kind of a referendum on Archie, right? If they win, like the Iowa game, I noticed on my message board, there was people saying, well, where are all the critics at now? Like, they just had a really great win. And then they lose to Rutgers, and all the people who were pissed after the Purdue game are now pissed again because they lost to Rutgers. And the reason that is because there's been now 3.5 years of so much inconsistency that the tolerance for any slip-ups is completely gone. People are done with that. So,
well, and it puts more pressure on the team that you haven't been successful in 3 years. Now it's like you have to prove something to save your coach and to get people to think about you differently. So it only makes you more. Think
about this. If there was fans this year, what do you think the atmosphere would be like?
Bad. Especially because they haven't played well at home.
Or just apathetic. It's one of the two, or just apathetic. Like people not showing up to games.
Yeah.
I got to say.
It becomes fun for nobody. It becomes no fun for the guy leading the team. It becomes no fun for the players. It becomes no fun for the fans that are watching it. So, I don't know. You get into talking about like how long you stick with somebody, and I think right now is not the time for that discussion because there's still a lot to play out. Things can change. Yeah. Indiana could turn a corner, and then this discussion's moot. And I do think there's, ultimately there is something to be said for how last season finished. The fact that they probably would have made the tournament had they got into the tournament. Maybe we're not having this discussion as spirited as we are right now, but still, the same issues were there last year that are there this year. So ultimately, like I said, it comes down to you got to win at a certain level if you want to continue. It's not going to be kicking the can down the road forever, being eighth or ninth place in the Big Ten, because that just won't be tolerated.
And the thing about last year is they would have squeaked into the tournament last year, but that would have meant that for this season, progress would be you're in comfortably and you're a factor
that's
in the
what we
Big
said.
Ten race. And that's the issue, is they're neither of those things right now. And as I mentioned in the banner moment, I like some of the individual pieces on this team. I really do. Like, I love Armand Franklin. That's a guy you can build around. Love Christian Lander's potential. Jordan Geronimo, Anthony Leal. Still have high hopes for a guy like Rob Finney to grow as a senior. But the pieces overall just aren't working. They're not fitting. And to the point that you made, Alex, about, it puts pressure on the team and it takes the fun out of it. I feel like you've hit a point like this when you can have a win over Iowa, but you can't fully enjoy it. We spent that whole stupid post-game show after the Iowa game getting excited, but then saying, we got to see what they do against Rutgers because we've seen this team do it before and they've fallen flat on their face. And then, by God, they go do it again, and prove all of that naysaying right. And you just want to be able to embrace a win, enjoy a win. You don't feel like you can right now. This team has won 4 games. They've only had a winning streak of greater than 2 games twice. They had 2 4-game winning streaks. I think that might have been Archie's first season when they played. They kind of had the schedule lined up where they played some pretty poor teams. I think they won 4 in a row. No, they did 4 in a row that season, and then I think Romeo's season, they ended the regular season with a 4-game winning streak. And that's it. And otherwise, they've had some 2-game winning streaks and obviously some big losing streaks, but they just never. It never gets.
There's no consistency.
Yeah,
there's no consistent. No, and here's the most frustrating thing. And this is the last point I'll make on this. You saw in the Iowa game what this team is supposed to be and what Archie's system is supposed to be. You looked at that defense and you're like, there it is. This is what has been advertised to us. You've seen it in moments, but that was pretty much a whole game where you saw what has been advertised about his defense and about his system for years. And you saw it and you're like, boom, it makes sense. And we've seen it with other teams before, but you hadn't seen Indiana do that before. And then, you look at, people were posting clips of just like, this is a clinic on how to run this defense. It's a clinic. And then to watch them play at Rutgers and do something completely different, against Rutgers. And that's more frustrating than if they had played like garbage at Iowa and then come out and played like garbage against Rutgers, because the capability is there. And for some reason, they're not motivated to do that game in and game out. And that's the most frustrating part. This team plays down to its competition, and it has for all 4 years. Played down to the competition, played up to the competition, and for the most part, been competitive a lot with good teams, but just rarely gets over the hump and does it, and then did it against Iowa. That's the most frustrating part, is you see the moments where you're like, this could work, and you get excited, and then it comes crashing down. And that is the most frustrating part, I think, as a fan. And that's what causes apathy. If there's no joy in it, because that joy is compounded right afterwards, is smacks you right in the face with reality. That's not fun. It'd be more fun to constantly be an underdog and occasionally take out a big dog, but you're not supposed to be that at Indiana. You're supposed to be a program that cares about winning, and that is the biggest, winning the right way, but winning. And that's not what we've got over the last couple of years, and even a couple of years before that. So
it's really the worst place for a fan base and an athletic department to be in, is stuck in the middle, because if it bottoms out completely, then it becomes clear what the
path is. Yeah.
And if it rises to the elite level, it's like, all right, then you have the person that you want to lead forward. But when you're kind of in this roller coaster, so to speak, of these high moments, beating Michigan State twice a couple seasons ago, I think beating them last year once, and then this year winning at Iowa, and then you have the moments like losing at home to Northwestern in a game that, really is at this point, looking worse and worse as the Northwestern losses continue to pile up, and then you can't beat Rutgers at home. It's just, it is what it is at this point. And until there's some kind of consistency one way or the other, like I said earlier, you're starting to see the fan base, the lines in the sand are being drawn, and it's just not a healthy spot to be in, I don't think, for the program.
Well, and then just, you mentioned the fundamental thing of free throw shooting. This whole team, the team's whole identity is built on getting to the free throw line, and you can't shoot free throws. And it's been that way for 4 years. It's like, Archie, at what point Do you hire a support staff member who specializes in working on shooting? And he said at the beginning of the year, he said, we worked on that a lot this offseason. Well, clearly it didn't work. I mean, I'm not trying to be a jerk about that. It didn't work. And so you've got to change what you're doing and change your philosophy and things if things aren't working. And it just feels like that hasn't really happened. The 3-point shooting, you'll see them have a game like they did against Rutgers where they hit a bunch of threes, and then you'll see a game against Purdue where they look clueless. And not only did they miss shots against Purdue, they were missing by a lot. These weren't close in and out, rim out, bad luck threes. And if that happens to you for an entire season, you think maybe we need to change something. We need to work on something. It's happened for 3.5 seasons now. And it's like, you've got to, at some point as a coach, have that awareness to be like, what we're doing here isn't working the way it did somewhere else, or the way it did for me growing up, or the way it did when I was coached. You've got to be willing to, if you want a job like this, is what I'm saying, you have to be willing to adjust and fix things. And that, I think, has been the most disappointing thing, is that the problems are the same and have been the same. And if you think, well, if our defense just gets better, our defense just gets better, okay, the defense has gotten better every year. You're still having the same results because it's the game happens on the whole length of the floor, not just on one end. And I'm glad that the defense, that we have a defensive philosophy, but at the same time, that can't come at the expense of the rest of the floor.
Plus, all those other examples around the country of pack line defenses that really succeed, the thing that they combine with the pack line defense when those teams are good is good shooting.
Efficient offense. And efficient offense.
Yeah, those teams can actually shoot the ball. The last thing I'll say on this, then we can move on. We're kind of at the point in a coach's tenure, at least for me, where I listen to the post-game press conferences and I just kind of get infuriated listening to it a little bit. And I know part of that is confirmation bias because I'm, questioning the coach as it is. But it also feels like Archie's getting a little bit, kind of defensive with some of the things he says. Like someone asked him, it might have been you, Alex, actually, asked him about the shooting, and he's like, hey, people say that we can't shoot and we went 10 for 17 against Rutgers. It's like, yeah, but you lost the game. That's, not the point. You didn't even want to answer a question about, Indiana's struggles to actually back up, wins over good teams in the next game. And so, I have no idea if the pressure is getting to him or if he can feel it, but, it feels like that from some of the comments. And so I guess the last question is, what could happen over the balance of this season that would change the way you feel about it? For me, it would be, go on a winning streak, really kind of put things together, not for 20 minutes, because even the Iowa game, they didn't even play very well the first 10 minutes, but they, were obviously great in the second half. But, to see it kind of game after game after game and really see things click and see the offense click and the defense kind of get to that, that great level. I don't know if it can be elite, but it can certainly be a great defense. And to see that for an extended period of time, and obviously if they do that, wins are going to come. But, barring that, I don't know. It feels like we've seen a pretty healthy amount of evidence over 3.5 seasons. And so it's going to take something pretty drastic over, the rest of this season to change minds. And I don't feel like I'm alone in that. I think that's how a lot of people are viewing the end of the season. I mean, what do you guys think? What needs to happen here over the balance of the season?
Well, you look at it right now, they're a game and a half out of 6th place, which is only half a game out of 5th place. So they're 2 games out of 5th place. It's like, I mean,
this is the loser math that we do now as IU fans.
Well, I'm just saying,
it just is,
but what my point is though, is that like, if you go on a winning streak, you're probably in the top 5 of the Big Ten, I mean, it's that simple. But do you have any faith that this team's going to win back-to-back games at any point this year? I mean, I don't. I'm not saying they can't do it. I'm just saying I don't really have faith that they're going to play well one night and then come out and back it up the next.
You can Ryan, you can throw out any discussion on where they finish in the Big Ten, because the only thing I feel like that's going to make people feel like you're still going to have people that are willing to give it a chance, right? No matter what, there's always going to be there's people that were willing to give Tom Crean year 10. They were out there. I mean, they were harder to find by that point, but they were out there. The only thing that turns this in any tangible way where you can actually feel a difference is if they make the tournament and win a game. I don't think going to the tournament at this point and losing the first game is going to make anybody feel good. I think if they get in the tournament and win a game, I think at that point you can say progress has been made, because this has never been about Big Ten. Tom Crean won the Big Ten how many times? It's about getting in the tournament consistently and giving yourself a chance to progress. Indiana fans would not care if they finished though. Would you rather have a top 5 or 4 Big Ten finish, or would you rather have a deep tournament run?
Both. It's Indiana. But this is the problem.
No, Alex
with
is right. Though. Alex is right.
No,
you know why the tournament matters more? Because it's the last thing you see.
Okay, the tournament does matter.
You
but
win the Big Ten and lose in the first round. Doesn't matter.
Big Ten championships with Tom Crean mattered. The problem is in between those, we finished 11th and 8th. Indiana fans want to be a factor in the Big Ten race. You don't have to win it, but you need to be in the top 4 or 5. I think
they're
that
not
does
win
matter
it this year. So my point is that they're not going to win it this year. So whether or not they finish 7th or 5th or 9th or 8th this year, what matters is getting in the tournament and having some type of success.
From a what's realistic perspective, that's true. Yeah.
Because, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is people are going to care more this year if they finish, say they finish 5th in the Big Ten and then get to the tournament and don't win a game. People are going to feel better if they finished 9th in the Big Ten and then got in the tournament and win a game. Trust me, because IU hasn't been to the tournament now since 2016. People are hungry for that to happen. I mean, realistically, this program is nowhere close to winning the Big Ten right now. But this is a year where the Big Ten could get 10 teams in the tournament, and Indiana has a chance to be one of those teams. So get there in advance, and then I think you have a chance to at least turn the narrative somewhat.
Well, and here's the best part about being in the tournament. You don't have to play teams from the Big Ten. Necessarily. You might run into one eventually, but you're playing a tougher schedule now than you might in the tournament. And so and you also play teams that don't know you as well. So a run is possible. Whereas I don't think a run
have to leave the state that you currently reside in.
I mean, all the advantages are built in for Indiana to do something if they actually even get there. But you got to get there.
Yes.
Who knows?
Yeah, no, that needs to happen. There's no question about it. This season, that absolutely needs to happen. And barring that, it's going to be a real tricky
for the program
off-season.
too. If the tournament's completely played in Indiana and they're not part of it,
it would be a meltdown of epic proportions. I mean,
oh my gosh, I don't. Well, that's a real uplifting note to end on, but it's true. It's absolutely 100%.
You're not saying anything false there,
no,
Alex.
It's totally true. It's totally true. That's what needs to happen this season. So now we'll see if it does. All right. Coming up in our third segment, we're going to answer your questions. We got a bunch of good ones, including one about Indiana's pregame warmups, and then whether Indiana basketball will ever be relevant again, as someone asked. Talk about that. Stick with us here on the Assembly Call. All right, so the only thing I want to add to that discussion is, like, the Big Ten is good. The Big Ten is really good this year. It was really good last year. But I do get a little tired of using the Big Ten is good, and I'm not saying you guys are doing this, but I do feel like other people do this, using the Big Ten is good as a crutch for why it's okay for Indiana to be like 6th, 7th, 8th. I remember growing up watching the Big Ten, and those rosters were littered with NBA players. This Big Ten is good, but it's not great. I mean,
what I would
good.
say is, and what I meant by that is, you might run into a MAC team that won its first round game. I mean, you're not necessarily going to have to play Michigan in the second round, or Iowa or Wisconsin, or the teams that know you well, know how to prepare for you, and whatever. You might run into a team that hasn't faced a pack line team all year, or hasn't played somebody as good as Trace Jackson Davis, and so that's what I meant by that. But I agree. I think that I've seen people like, well, the Big Ten's good if they're above 500. If they get to 500, it's great. No. You should be. I mean, Indiana should be.
Yeah, the Big Ten is good. It's year 4 for the coach.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, Indiana should be as good in this at this point as the top tier of the Big Ten at this point in a coach's tenure. Now there've been recruiting misses and all that, and I hear people say like, well, he's missed on some guys in recruiting, and you can't control where kids go. But you know what? Other teams are convincing that kid to go there. I mean, you're going to miss some, but when you're missing obvious guys you should take, or you're not prioritizing guys who turn out to be really good, that's on you a little bit, right? I mean, kids make decisions for the reasons they make decisions, but at some point you gotta hit more than you miss on some of these guys. Yeah. And You know,
I wasn't disagreeing, Jerod, with your overall point that they need to be better in the Big Ten consistently. I'm talking about in this moment of time, the only thing that matters is if they make the tournament this year, and it probably need to win a game.
Oh yeah,
to make people feel better.
I think winning. If you make I think winning a game in the tournament is almost as more important as making it. You know, I mean, of course you got to make it to win one, but it's like you've got to show that you can do something. You know, with the opportunity to get in a tournament, getting in the tournament, you can't just feel good about. Because guess what? They would have made the tournament last year. So if you're taking a step forward, that means you got to win a game. You know, because you were going to be in it last year.
And it's not really that high of a bar.
Not at all.
No.
Sweet 16 should be the bar every year.
We're not asking for a Final Four. I mean, people aren't asking for a Final Four. They just want to be in the conversation.
Here's the thing about the tournament and why the tournament matters so much. If this team plays out the way it is, you know, 8th in the Big Ten and makes it, but makes an Elite 8 run, all is forgiven from people. I guarantee you. Whether or not
if you make an Elite 8, of course.
Well, that's what I'm saying. An Elite 8 run erases all that badness. The tournament matters, and I've said it earlier, but it matters because it's the last thing you see. Last year, we felt really good going into the offseason because we watched that Nebraska game. And the Nebraska game was the last game they played. And it was one of the best results they had. Now, we forgot conveniently Nebraska had like 3 football players off the street playing on the bench, but Indiana looked good in that game. And so it made you feel pretty good because, well, they definitely wrapped up a tournament spot and they blew out Nebraska and guys look good and we end on that and you think, okay, we can build on this. But if in the next game they had laid an egg against a bad team or like, you know, a not great team, our outlook would have been different. The last thing you see colors how you look going forward.
Yes.
How you
look, if this team can actually string together 3 straight wins to make an Elite 8, that would be incredible. It wouldn't erase
I'm not
everything.
Predicting that. I'm just saying.
But it would finally provide some counter arguments that I don't really think are there right now.
No, not at all. I agree. So. I don't expect this to happen, Jerod. But if it does, people's attitudes change completely overnight.
Yeah. I don't even think it takes Elite 8. I think it just.
I agree. I'm just giving that.
Winning a game.
I agree.
Because it
I'm
hasn't
just giving
happened
that
yet.
example.
Do something that hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, I think what that would do
realistically
is
they're not getting any higher in the Big Ten standings this year, so that's out the window.
You make the tournament, you win a game. It continues the one thing Archie's had in his favor, which is progress every year. It's been slower than anybody wants, but that at least continues it. You know, now again, you would enter next season. Because if you make the tournament and win a game, he's coming back for sure. There's no question about that. So you would enter next season.
He's coming back for sure, regardless. But
yeah, I think we both do. Unless like let's say this season falls off a cliff. Unless a donor is swooping in with a lot of money, Archie's going to be back next year. Like it's just you know, swooping in with a lot of money and then being willing to pay to offer up some for the next coach as well. Archie's coming back. I cannot see. I've talked to
it's more likely than not, I think.
I would say we're looking without intervention from the outside, like a booster coming in backing a dump truck full of money up. I think it's 90-10 he's back. That's I've talked to enough people around the athletic department in the program that just feel like it's, you know, and I've talked to enough people in athletic departments around college sports that nobody's making moves this year unless there's a bunch of money coming in because it's just the situation they're in. This isn't a normal year, you know?
Yeah.
Budgets aren't what they were and may not be for a while.
That's true. No, that makes it much less likely. It's not a normal year for coach moves.
Yeah, in a normal year, we're having a different conversation. I don't know how different, but we're having a different conversation. But this is a normal year.
And again, the reason why that conversation is too early is we have to see what happens this season.
Of course,
because
I'm saying at this point,
yes, because if things go really bad, at some point it could be a financial consideration of, you know, we might need to make a move just to have some excitement heading into next year. So we just have to see where we are in March.
Look, USC is in a situation where their head coach has been a disappointment every year he's been the head coach, except for the year they went to the Rose Bowl and won it, which was very early in his tenure. I think it was his first year, actually. Other than that, he's been a complete disappointment given the talent they've had. But guess what? He signed to a contract they can't buy out right now. But the consideration is, well, how many donations do you lose by continuing to have him be your head coach? You know, we're not at that point with Indiana where like boosters are threatening people. But I mean, if you continue to not have success, when does that start to happen? To say like, I'm not going to buy my seats next year. I'm not going to pay for the boosters lounge next year. I'm not going to sit, there and drive down from the house to be disappointed every week,
Yeah. Okay.
Let it play out, see what happens.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
No.
All right, let's hit segment 3. We can go through these questions kind of fast, but we got some fun ones.
How much time?
We got like 5 or 6 minutes for this segment.
Okay.
And then we can just hit the rest of them afterwards. Okay. Here we go.
This is Nick Zeisloft. I never miss an open 3, and I never miss an episode of The Assembly Call.
Thank you, Nick. I'm Jerod Morris here with Ryan Phillips and Alex Bozich from Inside the Hall. Remember that you need to be subscribed to our email newsletter. We send out a weekly IU news roundup, even during the offseason and all throughout the regular season. And after every game, we send out a detailed postgame analysis. Just text IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com. That's IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com. All right, guys, time for the mailbag. All these questions submitted via our private IU basketball discussion community, which you can learn more about at assemblycall.com/community. Here first, I'm just going to present this comment from Bruce. He says, just a comment. These kids play so many AAU games that I really don't think wins and losses mean anything. I'm going to disagree with Bruce on that. I understand the frustration after seeing a performance like Rutgers. But I'm gonna disagree on drawing a line between AAU and I also just disagree with the premise of the players not caring. And what I think happens in a game like Rutgers is you see another team play harder and play tougher, which they do, and you equate that with Indiana giving no effort. And that's not what happened. Rutgers just out-toughed and outperformed Indiana. But it's not that the players gave nothing. It's not that the players don't care. Rutgers was just the better, hungrier team on that day.
Rutgers did to Indiana what Indiana did to Iowa. Straight up, I rewatched the Rutgers game. They just tried harder. They played harder. Wasn't that Indiana didn't try. Rutgers just was hungrier.
Yeah.
Simple.
Alex, do you put any stock into Bruce's hypothesis?
I mean, Gonzaga's players play AAU, right? Baylor's play AAU, right? I mean, they're winning, so I don't. I mean, that's to me. It's not. I mean, I think the biggest hole in that argument is that from talking to enough people close to players and parents and program and all that, I mean, to say that guys don't care about winning is just wrong. I mean, they want to win more than anyone listening to the show wants to win. I mean, Archie Miller wants to win. Do you think Archie Miller wants to be 9-7? No. I mean, it's hard to win at the level that Indiana aspires to win at. If it was easy, then it wouldn't have been since 2002 that they've been to the Final Four, or since 1987 since they won the national championship. So, I mean, it's a different era in college basketball than it was when Indiana was last, one of the top programs in the country. It's been proven that, a program like Gonzaga can rise up from basically nothing and be a national power. So it's not, I mean, just because you're Indiana on your jersey really doesn't hold any weight now. So, but no, I don't subscribe at all to the theory that just because these guys play so many games that they don't care about winning.
Yeah, having the Indiana across the front of your jersey only matters as much as you take pride in that Indiana being on the front of your jersey. And I think these guys do take pride in Indiana being on the front of your jersey. But the Rutgers players played like they took a lot of pride in Rutgers being on the front of theirs. And so you got to go out and beat teams. And Indiana just wasn't ready that day, but hopefully better days are ahead for them. From Jim Tom Hoosier, do you think IU will be relevant on the national stage again in your lifetime? I'm a little older and have all but given up. My answer to that question is yes. I think there are too many institutional things that Indiana has going for it. It's a good recruiting base. It's a good fan base, good tradition, good facilities. You just have to get the right coach. This program can be good just like other program. I mean, who thought Baylor was going to be this relevant 20 years ago? And look at them. And yes, it took Scott Drew a while to get them going, but they're rolling. You got to get the right guy, and you have to be patient with the right guy. And this is a question people are going to ask about Archie. Shouldn't you be patient? Should we really start over? Well, that depends on if you believe he's the right guy or not. If you believe he's the right guy, then you stick with him. That's where I'm coming from, is I've just kind of lost that belief. But it's all about just getting the right coach. It's college sports. So if Indiana can get the right guy in there, whether it's Archie or somebody else, they'll be relevant and start winning again. And if they don't, if they botch the next hire, or if this hire doesn't work out, then they won't. I mean, it's kind of that simple.
Screw up back-to-back hires. That never happens.
For my sake, I hope so, because I've probably only got, 26, 27 more years of doing Inside the Hall before I hang it up. So I'd like to at least go to a Final Four at some point, right? I mean, I've been to the Sweet 16 3 times, but it's about as far as I've gone in the tournament in terms of covering games. So
it is time. Okay, so the last question that we'll talk about here before we wrap the show, from David. So Fish said this week on an indie radio show, whose host is a big fan of the Assembly Call, that he could tell simply from observing how the players were warming up before the Rutgers game that the team wasn't going to play well. Example, goofing around, smiling, laughing, shooting 35-footers, etc. And he was proven correct. Is his observation valid? And if so, does that speak to a lack of leadership from players and or coaches? Why or why not? Alex, do you want to take this one first?
I mean, I've been to probably 15% of the games that Don Fisher's been to over his career. So he's seen a lot more than I've seen. But what I can say from when I've been at games, and I haven't been to any this season, but in previous years, I haven't really seen any correlation between how Indiana warms up to how they play in the game. I mean, it all has looked pretty same and pretty standard going back to the Tom Crean era to Archie Miller. I haven't seen a whole lot of difference. And mind you, I also watch the other team warm up, and I don't necessarily see I don't see teams that come out and like warm up hard for 60 minutes. And I mean, I look at like NBA players. I mean, Steph Curry's like shooting shots from like the tunnel in warm ups, and he comes out and he's fine. I mean, he's a professional. Obviously,
he's
it's a little bit different, but I don't know. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that comes up and is discussed when you're not winning enough games, right? This kind of goes back to the whole point that we were talking about in the last segment, is that there's not enough consistency. And so you try to look for something to explain why things aren't going well. And this is something that's been discussed. Now, I mean, I love Fish as much as anybody. I know. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying Fish is wrong. I'm just saying, and I wasn't there, so I have no idea what was happening because I didn't see the warm up.
I mean, Trace didn't even jump for the opening tip, so I think.
Do you think that was a result of warm ups?
Yeah, here's what I'm going to say.
It might be confirmation bias. All I'm going to say is, when Fish isn't known for being an extremist or for kind of putting, half baked theories
people
out
on
there,
blast, yeah.
And then Trace isn't ready for the opening tip. Is that a big deal? I don't know. But then you look at how the team played, they didn't seem quite as focused. So I don't know, maybe there's something to it for that one day. Not being in the gym, I don't know. But some of the pieces add up when you're kind of looking back at it.
Here's what I'll say about it, though. If those guys were doing that and they had won the game, people would be like, they were so loose in warm-ups. They were just having fun. Like, I mean, it's, again, hindsight bias. I'm not saying Fish is wrong, and I agree. But I've seen that a lot. And Alex is right. I mean, that kind of stuff happens. Now, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, whatever, but I do think there's a little bit of hindsight there. It's like if they were goofing off after winning the Iowa game and they're relaxed, you'd say they were relaxed and they were ready to go and they were just having fun. And they're having fun playing basketball. That would have been the reaction had they won the game. Because they lost it, it changes it. And so I'm not saying that he's wrong. But I'm also saying that I think that interpretations can change based on results.
Yes, except that this was Fish. That's all I'm going to say. This wasn't like Hoosier fans.
And Fish knows his stuff. I'm
on Twitter saying
I'm not downplaying Fish's experience, and I'm just saying that I think that there might be a tendency to overreact to something like that coming off a bad loss. That's all.
Yeah,
that's it. We're done. No more questions.
He could be right.
Yeah. All right. That's going to have to do it for us on this week's edition of the Assembly Call. If you want to see us do the show live, join us at assemblycall.com on Thursday nights for the live broadcast of our Assembly Call radio recording. And don't forget to go to assemblycall.com or text IU to 66866 to join our free email newsletter. Special thank you to Bob Thompson, who produces a lot of the music that you hear on the show, and thank you for listening. We will talk to you again next Tuesday after Indiana plays Illinois. Until then, keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim. Damn it, I did it again.
Take it from me, native Hoosier Mark Titus. Keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim. And go Hoosiers.
Thank everybody for coming out.
All right, I got to get out of here, folks. Thank you.
I don't like carrots.
Man, I haven't hosted enough of these shows. I keep forgetting that we played the drop.
I know. It's like, Jerod, what are you doing? Even I know not to do that.
I know. All right, you want to run through a few of these other questions real quick?
Yeah. First of all, I just want to advertise, like the new podcast I'm doing at the Big Lead.
Oh, that's right. You got a new show,
Best of 7 podcast. It's on Apple, Spotify, all the places you listen to podcasts.
All right. Now, are you doing any more for this show than just showing up with a mic and talking? Are you doing any technical setup?
No.
Or planning?
None. We have a producer.
All right.
I just show up. I don't feel so bad. I'm hosting. I am hosting, but I just do this. I just sit and talk.
Okay.
The other guy actually hits the record on the Zoom.
Okay. So you don't even do that. Okay.
No. I mean, I've done that before, but I don't even do that.
Okay.
Did you say earlier that the Illinois game got moved to 9:00?
I saw it on Twitter. Nothing's ever gone wrong using that as a response, has it?
No,
So,
fully reliable.
I did. Okay, so let's hit a couple of these questions real quick because there's a couple of good ones. We don't need to spend a lot of time on them. Let's see. Jeffrey asked about Stewart. We talked about that. Daryl says, do you think Archie is too stringent with calling the plays, especially on the offense? Should he loosen the reins a little bit and allow the players to get in the groove or freelance more?
I think he would if he could. I think the guys look to him for the play. I don't know if that's just training or whatever, but I mean, how often do the point guards come across and not call a play and look straight to him? I don't know if that's by design. I have a feeling it's not because some other times they don't. But it feels like anytime they look, and they see a defense they don't feel comfortable against, they just stare right at Archie, and then Archie has to be like, all right, run this, and I don't know if that's just a lack of development of the guards or what, but I mean, you would think a coach would want his point guard to be able to recognize and run his own things. I have a hard time feeling like that is told to the players. You have to look at me for the play call every time. I would be very surprised if that was the situation because you waste so much time doing that.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think the problem with the offense is that they're not getting good shots or executing. I think it's just that they're not making enough of the good shots that they're producing. I mean, hadn't there been a lot? I haven't looked too closely at that aspect of it, but I've had some people send me some stuff, like some charts and stuff about like the good, quote unquote, good shots that they're producing is pretty highly ranked.
Yeah.
But in terms of them actually making the shots, I think that's where some of the frustration from Archie comes in from the shooting perspective, is that he was a good shooter himself. And like he's asked about this stuff, and it's hard for him to fathom guys making less than 70% of their free throws because that wasn't who he was as a player. Or, I don't know. I mean, your
job as a coach is to relate to players who aren't just like you.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, here's the thing. It's like I can identify what's wrong with a lot of the free throw shooters on the team. Like just watching them, watch games and look for these two things. One, a lot of them rise up through their motion, pause, and then shoot. It's not one Trace does that all the time. When he stops at the top of his motion, you can bank that he's going to miss the free throw.
That's a shooter who's not confident.
Unless he line drives it through. That's the only way it goes in when he does that. The other thing is a lot of them come slowly up and lean back and shoot when they're shooting their free throws. Look for those two things when you watch Indiana play. A lot of them do it. When they miss, they're doing one of those two things. Sometimes you miss, it rattles in and out. But for the most part, that's happening almost every time. And it's like, if I can recognize that, like you guys have to be able to train guys out of that. It's not hard. I mean, again, Alex said it earlier. It's one of the first things you learn as a basketball player when you're old enough to actually reach the hoop from the free throw line is how to shoot free throws and how to be consistent in your delivery every time when you find a comfortable delivery, how to finish, how to follow through. I mean, you see guys go for their shot and pull their hand back after they shoot it. It's like, that's basic stuff you're not supposed to do. Every shooting coach will tell you that. Every shooting coach will tell you lean towards the basket because you're not jumping, so you need something to carry you forward. So you're supposed to lean as you shoot. and to follow through and to go with one smooth motion, because if you stop, you're stopping the movement of the ball, and then it's all on your wrist and hand to propel the ball instead of the rest of your body as you're going. It's all basic stuff, and yet they don't do that, and they have consistently not done that for 4 years. Like, that stuff, something that has to be addressed. And Jerod, you've pointed out before, his teams didn't shoot free throws well at Dayton either.
Never been in the above 200 in the country.
And
they've never been above, even average as a free throw shooting team.
And here's the thing: NBA teams have now gone all in on this version of looking at shooters. They look at free throw percentages. So if you're telling recruits, if you're and it's starting to get out there that they think that good free throw shooting leads to good 3-point shooting, not good 3-point shooting in college. They think good free throw shooting leads to good 3-point shooting. And if you're a recruit coming through and you're seeing a team that does not shoot free throws well, and where the coaches clearly do not develop good free throw shooting, you might be taking yourself out of consideration for a draft spot somewhere. And so that kind of stuff's going to get around. Especially now that NBA teams are being so much more open about the way they're scouting shooters. And so, I mean, that's something you've got to fix. You just have to fix it.
Yeah.
And whether that's bringing in an outside look, getting rid of an assistant coach, or bringing in a new assistant coach, whether that's support staff hiring, I don't know, but there's got to be a way to bring in somebody to teach these guys how to shoot better.
Next question from Scott. He says, okay, so between Trace, Race, and Armand, we usually have 2 consistent players. Can someone go back to winning years and see what our point guard production was in scoring, turnover, and assist ratios? I feel our biggest gap is in point guard play. So if you go back, and I mean, the answer to this question is obviously yes. Obviously, Al and Rob this year are struggling up and down, as we've said. If you look at all of Indiana's good recent teams, like the teams that you would kind of say were great or elite, they had an all-time great guard on the team. In 2016, you had Yogi. 2013, you had Yogi, Jordan Hulls, Victor Oladipo. Go back to 2002, you had Tom Coverdale, you have Dane Fife. Then you go back to the early 90s teams. You've got Damon Bailey, Greg Graham. 1987, you've got Steve Alford, Keith Smart. So, I mean, college basketball is a guards game, and you've got to have great guards to be really good. And this program has just really struggled with guard play, and that's why they're so inconsistent. And as long as Indiana is building their teams around the post and not the backcourt, they're going to be inconsistent, so.
Well, and in the tournament to win, I've always thought that of course you need both. Like, that's an obvious statement. You need guards to get through the first 2 weekends, and I think you need guards and a post to win the championship. Because you need easy baskets when guys get tired from playing so many intense games. You need a guy around the basket who can lay the ball in. Just competent. You need a competent post guy. He doesn't even have to be an elite, but you need somebody around the basket who can clean up the trash and who can score easy basket for you when your guard's legs go. But that's the point, though, is that to even get to that point, you need the guard play. And so I get building around an old school mentality of playing through the paint, completely understand that. But you need the other guys to balance that out. And on Indiana's team, they just aren't. And Armand has turned into a really good player. And I love what he could become potentially as a junior, senior, whatever. But he can't be alone in providing a lift for you from the perimeter. There needs to be help. And the games where he gets help on the perimeter, Indiana looks like a completely different team than they do when those other guys are absent.
And the other thing to remember, Alex, is, Archie didn't build his resume at Dayton with post players. He built that with smaller teams that were guard driven. So I don't even think he prefers to play the way he's played at Indiana, but the rosters that he has built at Indiana, you could look at them and your best scoring option has always been in the post. Your most talented offensive player has always been a post guy. Now obviously Romeo's year, you had Romeo and Jawan, but other than that, what are you going to do when Jawan Morgan is your best player, and then now you've had the last 2 seasons, Trace Jackson Davis is your best player, and you don't have great guards to give the ball to and to trust. But that comes back to, that's not absolving him. That comes back to roster management.
Yeah, and the guards, like Brian's point, like Franklin's been really good and is someone that should be looked at as a building block for the future, someone that can be a really good player, not only just the rest of this season, but the seasons to come. But the rest of the guards, if you just look at them player by player, nothing consistently comes easy for them offensively that they do. I mean, you got to have a guy who can break people down off the dribble and create for others, or you got to have a guy that you can just throw it to and say, go break somebody down and get a bucket. And they don't have that. I mean, Yogi was that, right? I mean, Yogi in a late shot clock situation, Yogi could go step back and hit a three, or he could set somebody up for a bucket. There's nobody on this team that you look at and say they can do something like that. And I'm not saying they have to be Yogi, but I'm saying that there's something to the fact that I just don't think the guard play in general is good enough. And to me, that's the biggest deficiency I see. And that's another reason why it's like, at some point, I'd like to see Lander, regardless of whatever his shortcomings are defensively, have a little bit of a longer leash to try to do some things, because I at least have confidence that he can maybe bring a little bit of that. Is it going to be consistent? No, but at least like last game, he hit those 2 threes, and it was like he created those shots for himself. Like it was like him doing that. Like Rob is very hesitant to kind of go look for his offense, and Al's a fine player, a good, solid. He's going to be 1,000-point scorer, but he's not somebody that you're going to like have as your first or second option offensively.
He's not going to blow up a game on his own. I mean,
exactly.
Well, the point about Lander,
this team is just like they're just not good enough to, when they get in a game that's. I mean, they did it at Iowa because Jordan Bohannon missed 8 threes in that game. In the second half, Iowa couldn't make anything. But
thank you, Jordan.
Like they just can't. They're not good enough to like separate themselves in a close game, right? It's they don't step on somebody's throat when they have them down. And I don't think it's because they lack the killer instinct. I just don't think they don't have the horses to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think in a lot of ways, Rob and Al those guys are playing, like I said, they're playing some of their best basketball. It just hasn't quite been good enough. The thing with Lander, Ryan, you think back to the conversations we were having before the season. What was the formula for this Indiana team to take the step forward that we all hoped they would be able to? It was, all right, Lander he's reclassifying. He's probably going to struggle a lot. But if you get him rolling by February and March and he can be a difference maker, that's the key to this team actually being better than 6th, 7th, 8th in the conference, because he's a potential difference-making guard. Now, look, we saw a short flash of good defense against Iowa, and we saw, a longer flash against Rutgers where he made some shots, played better defense. To say that he's ready to turn into that guy now and be a major difference maker, he's not there yet. But at least he's showing those flashes, and I completely agree with Alex. I think he should have had a longer leash this entire season, and maybe we would have gotten to this point a little bit sooner. But who knows? Maybe he needed to have that time on the bench to understand that he needed to play better
He's clearly
defense.
had the hardest time adjusting.
Yes, and so maybe all those things are true. But now that he's showing this, I completely agree. I think you've got to give him more minutes, because that's where you could potentially unlock this season. Is if he gains some confidence.
It's a high risk, high reward move. Let's be real, because of the way
now is the time for that.
Agreed. And that's what I was going to say, is that maybe the high risk, high reward calculation wasn't worth it a few weeks ago, but now you're getting to a point where you might have to gamble. And I'll be honest, I think this week is probably huge for Lander, because the last time he had a week, to practice without playing a game, he came out at Iowa and came out at Rutgers and looked like a much better player in those 2 games. He only played a couple minutes in Iowa, but the difference was visible quickly on the defensive end, for sure. And he wasn't forcing things on offense. His tendency is to get beat on defense because he's not a great on-ball defender yet, and then go down and immediately try and launch a 3 or do something and lose the ball or miss a shot badly. That's been the pattern with him, and why he gets yanked after 4 minutes. Against Iowa, he actually looked like he was trying to run the offense and looked like he was guarding off the dribble and got a steal and looked like he was more engaged. Now, it wasn't perfect, but it looked better. Against Rutgers, same thing. He looked more engaged. It looked like he wasn't just one of 5 guys out there like you see in AAU a lot, and you see with really good players who were dominant in high school. It looks like it doesn't matter who the other 4 guys are on their team. It just matters who they are. And you could put anybody out there with them, and it wouldn't matter. It wouldn't change their game at all. It looked like he was actually engaged in the team concept in both those games. This week, he's got another week to practice and maybe get some more run in practice where you're not just preparing for the next game, because when you get into conference play, your practices are essentially scouting report practices where you're working on what to do against that team. You're not getting a chance to sort of, explore what you could do on the floor with the rest of the team. So I think this week was huge for Lander. And I agree with both of you guys. And I think you're at a point now where 5 weeks ago, I wouldn't have argued this because I saw what he looked like on the floor and he didn't look like he fit. Now you need that guy. You need that guy to step up because your ceiling is getting lower and lower and lower every week. You need to raise it a little bit. And if it means you go through growing pains, guess what? Lander gets playing time and he comes in next year as a starting point guard and, is not as shocked by the competition. So I don't see the downside anymore. A couple weeks ago I did. Now I don't.
And the Illinois game is going to be a guards game. Period.
Always is.
Kofi and Trace are going to do what they do, but it's going to come down to guards. And you look at Illinois and you're like, oh, they got Trent Frazier, they got Io, they got Curbelo, they got Adam Miller.
Yeah.
How's Indiana matching that?
Yeah.
Who gives them a chance to? I'm not saying that Finney and Durham don't have to play well because they do, but they don't. It's going to have to be other guys. The other guy I'd say that I'd just like to see be a little bit more aggressive is Leal.
Yeah,
it seems like
he had a couple open shots that he didn't
Right.
take, and Archie pulled him aside in that game. Was like, hey,
Right.
shoot it, And he's right. Archie was right to do that because he needs to shoot.
Yep. Last question on the topic of Lander from Max. In terms of his development, do you think moving up a class was the right move? Basically, a year of college weight rooms and practices, but a few minutes versus a year of full game action at the high school level.
It was.
I think so.
Yeah, it was probably the right move.
I think so.
The big thing with him is the weight room. He needed to be in a college strength and conditioning where they can change your body because he was even in high school he was small. Like weight wise. So, I think that was the right move. And whether it works out or not, I think it was the smart move, and there was a reason for it.
I agree.
Well,
Jared,
Alex, quit yawning. You're making me tired.
Sorry. Getting tired.
It's late. It's later here than it is there. Ryan's probably just getting ready for dinner. 7:40.
7:40. Yeah, the pizza's on its way.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. Well, Alex, thanks for being here. Glad we were able to do this. I miss talking IU basketball with you every week. So glad at least Andy was able to come on. You got other assembly call people coming on now.
Oh yeah, he even had me on after how many years? It was great. I had a blast. It was great. Talked
Jerod
a little White Sox trash.
Jerod left me, and I had to go. Had to go to some other assembly call reinforcements.
Anytime you need it,
I think
Alex.
Coach is the only one I haven't had on. I think
he's a fun guest.
He is a fun guest. He is a fun guest.
Turn your butt cheeks on.
I don't get to watch the post games as much as I would like. I sometimes watch the replay, but usually I've got this computer and the computer next to me. Now that there's Zooms for both, I've figured out that you can't be in two Zooms at once, so I have two computers now. So I'm in the opposing presser and the IU presser. Trying to watch both as much as possible. It's actually nice not having to get home at 2 a.m. I can just walk upstairs and get in bed when I'm done.
That's a bit of a drive for you.
But do you feel more disconnected from the team this year? Like than you normally do? Like, do you feel like there's stuff that you're missing? Not being there?
And I also have a hard time watching the games because I have YouTube TV and it's delayed, and I'm watching like the live stats on the screen, and things are happening on the live stats.
That even happens watching it on like ESPN.
I know.
There's the slight delay.
I know. I hate it when I accidentally look over at the live stats and I see that like we scored or they scored. I'm like,
I always keep it closed until timeouts.
Yeah, I'm kind of glad I haven't gone though, because I really want to experience
an empty gym.
Like I feel like it'd be.
I talked to a few people who were in the bubble, in the NBA bubble. And they said that was cool, but it was also a small venue, so you could feel the intensity of the benches and stuff like that. In a big open arena like that, I think it would be so weird.
Yeah.
What's the bubble? I felt like the bubble, the TV presentations was a little bit better than.
Yeah. Well, and it was because again,
they had those screens everywhere, and there was just.
They set it up specifically for a TV broadcast. Yeah.
Right. Some of the it's not the IU game, but some of the other games I've watched this year, the camera angles have been so weird.
Mm-hmm. There's one that's really high. Where was I watching the other night? that was almost it looked like it was from the top of the rafters down. It was Duke Louisville, maybe.
Yeah, the Louisville games are real weird.
Terrible. So
I'll be interested to see what the tournament games look like.
I bet they will set that up a lot.
I bet it'll look a lot better.
Yeah, because they'll go out of their way to set it up to look.
Although they haven't said for sure if fans are going to be allowed to the tournament games.
Yeah, that's going to be big. I would bet by then
at Lucas Oil they'll have somebody. They're not going to play the national championship in Lucas Oil with no fans.
Yeah, I was thinking if there's going to be no fans, put it at the field house. Like, why would you put it in that big empty?
They could do something like the NFL is doing, like allow like 10,000 healthcare workers to be vaccinated or something.
No, that would be a really good idea. Yeah, and create some atmosphere. Like let them from the home states of the teams, or something like that.
Quick pop quiz: where does Indiana place currently in the Big Ten in raw efficiency margin? Dylan Burkhart just tweeted out a graphic.
Well, I know I did it Monday. They were 6th. Are they still 6th?
I would say I was going to guess 7th.
They're 7th because Rutgers just jumped over them after their win tonight.
I was guessing, in that 6 to 8 range somewhere.
Only 5 teams have positive efficiency margins. Indiana's actually slightly ahead of Purdue. Go for it.
I mean, Purdue's not.
We're scoring 5 more points per possession than Purdue.
Purdue
per 100 possessions.
Purdue isn't that impressive. Like, I mean, even when they beat Indiana, they hit a bunch of threes, but like there was nothing where I was like, that guy scares you. Like, I know Trevion Williams is good, but against Trace, I don't see it as like he's way better. I mean, like I just feel like there's
we have to go up there
and
win.
I know.
Have to go up there and win.
I completely agree. But
Michigan
like,
State,
I look at that team
currently 12th in raw efficiency margin in the Big Ten Conference.
Penn State is?
No, Michigan State.
Northwestern's second to last, right? I'm not looking at this, but I'm guessing. Yeah. Nebraska's last, then Northwestern, then Michigan State. Then I'm trying to think. Penn State next or Maryland?
Maryland by a pretty decent margin, actually. Maryland only plays good against really good teams on the road,
which is so weird.
3-7.
It's like, well, I mean, Indiana.
Indiana has. I think that you mentioned Purdue. I think the games Indiana has to win are at Rutgers and at Northwestern.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
At Michigan and maybe Michigan State if they play them. And they got to beat Michigan State at home. They've got to beat Minnesota at home. Who's the other one? Michigan State, Minnesota.
You got to go beat.
So this is
they got to win one of this week. I think.
Does Indiana have the most difficult schedule in the Big Ten? Like, are they going to wind up with the number 1 strength of schedule in the Big Ten?
No, Northwestern and Nebraska are because they don't have to play themselves. That's always how that works.
Oh, right. Okay. Of the teams that aren't Northwestern and Nebraska, like, are they going to? Because I remember when that schedule came out, I was like, well, they basically have to play all the good teams twice, and they don't get any of the bad teams.
Yeah, twice. I mean, they get Ohio State once only. It's on the road,
and they're only going to end up playing.
If I was Indiana, I wouldn't. I'd be fine with not making up at Michigan State and at Michigan, right?
Oh yeah, of course.
I wouldn't mind playing Michigan State.
But even that's a tough road trip, And that team's it's not like that
Michigan
team isn't
State
talented.
like how many times in a row? I mean,
I know.
Sometimes they're going to lose to them.
I know.
Yeah, and the other thing is, it's not like that team's not talented; they're just not playing well. Like they have enough talent to beat it.
Talk about how bad you need guard play.
Mm-hmm.
There's your number 1 example.
I know.
Yep. All right, gents, this was fun.
All right, was fun.
Thanks for being here.
Food's here.
Hey, look at that! Perfect timing.
All right, later, guys. Later, everybody.
All right, we'll talk to you guys Tuesday after IU Illinois. Have a good weekend.
Take care.
See you all.
Later.